Welcome back, my friends. We have been building the card game called War for the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. Now, as you have noticed from the past few videos, we have been looking at methods that allow us to remove or delete items from a list. Before moving forward, I thought it's a good idea to sort of consolidate all of that and look at them in a comparative and sort of manner so that we understand each of them very, very well. The first method that we looked at was this thing called pop. Now we use this, for example, to make the player play a move or the computer play a move where we said, okay, card P is player card pop 0. Now the way it works is we specify an index, we remove that item from the list, but at the same time, we make sure that this gets assigned to a variable. So pop, the beautiful part is it returns a value. We can assign that to a variable. So two things going on here, but this is an index and it must be a single index. Next, we looked at clear, for example, to clear the table cards. Well, clear is quite straightforward. Basically, go and delete everything from that list. That's like an equivalent of scratch would be delete all of table cards. Next, we looked at del. Del is kind of like delete in scratch, and here we specify the indices and we delete those particular let's say items at those indices. Now the interesting bit here is that unlike pop, I can specify a range of indices, and that's what we did. For example, to delete the top three cards from the player cards. We could also specify one index, but we can specify a valid range. Now there's one more way to remove items from list, and that's actually called remove. We have not used in this project, and I don't think there's an equivalent in Scratch, but this is basically working on the values. So for example, if we have a list A 10, 20, 30, I can go and say, okay, go and remove 20 from this. Now, once I do this, the list will become 10, 30 because 20 has been removed. Now remember, 20 is not an index because index is 0, 1, 2. So to achieve the same thing over here, I would have to do del A 1. So that's going to remove 20 from the list. So here remove, we're specifying the value directly. Of course the value must be in the list, and if let's say there are multiple values, then it removes the first one. Now here I must want add a point as well. In pop we can choose not to give the index, in which case the index is taken as -1 or let's say the last item of a list. Now all of this will become more clear if we look at some examples. So I just come in here and I say, okay, let me just define a list. Let's say 10, 20, say 30, 40, 50, 60, say 50, 60, 70, and maybe 80. Now, remember the first method we looked at was this pop. So I say, okay, let me just say a dot pop, say for example, say maybe 1. Now, notice this returns a value. That's why I see a value here. I could have assigned this to a variable. And at the end of this, my list has become 10, 20, 30, 10, 10, 30, 40, 50, 60, because 20 has been sort of popped out. Right now, again, let's say I did a dot pop without any argument. Then I'm going to have 80 coming out because remember the argument becomes -1, and that's the last item of the list. It's exactly same as strings. We can index from the reverse right side as well. That's -1. Now, on the other hand, if I said a dot pop, let's say, I try to pop out, let's say, multiple values, let's say 0 to 2 in steps of 1. This is an invalid syntax. It doesn't allow me, so that's not allowed. So right now my a is, say whatever 10, 30, 40, 40, 50, 60, 70. Of course, I can say a dot clear, and that will remove everything. A becomes an empty list. Let me just assign a once again to, let's say, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 7, say 70, 80. Now I can use del, let's say a, for example, let's say so a say 0. That's going to remove from this 10, but notice nothing was returned, so it's a little bit different from pop. Pop is a pop 0 would have returned 10, although it would have also removed 10 from there. Now I can go, for example, now I can do a little bit of, let's say, slicing here. I can say, okay, well, remove for me all items which are, let's say, starting on 0, going in all the way to the end in steps of say 2. So if I were to do, let's say, this, I look at a, notice 20, 40, 60 and 80 have been removed because I kind of removed all the even items, and hence the list remains to be 30, 50, 70. So the amazing part about del is that I can specify a range or I can specify an index. Now Coming to remove, now notice remove can, allows me to remove basically, any item which is on the list. So I say remove, let's say for example, say 70. It's going to take 70 away from this. Nothing is returned. So my list is now 30, 50. I try removing something that is not part of this list. So I try removing, let's say 40. This is going to give me an error because, this is clearly not in the list. Now I'm going to take one more example of remove to just sort of tell you what happens when there is a repeated item in the list. So I'm going to take my list, let's say as 10, 20, 30, 40, and I say, let's extend this list by adding to this, for example, say 20 and let's say 60. Let's just do that. So if I did this, my A becomes, notice, these two have been added as individual elements, 20 and 60. Now, if I say a dot remove, for example, 20, and if I look at a, notice the first value, first occurrence of 20 has been removed, and the list is 10, 30, 40, 20, 60. So, this is how these things work. I hope you found this interesting. This consolidation, I think, helps. In general, if you think this method of learning works for you, it's interesting, look at our website because there are many, many, many such activities. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.